For decades, Sandringham symbolized royal continuity, a sacred inheritance woven into the bloodline of kings. But what if that unbreakable tradition was secretly rewritten? What if King Charles discovered, not in ceremony but in silence, that his mother had already made a decision that would redefine the monarchy forever? A decision that didn't favour him, but Catherine. The moment that revelation surfaced, everything changed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Sandringham was never just an estate, it was the quiet heartbeat of monarchy itself. The place where crowns were set aside, but destiny was never forgotten. Generations had walked its grounds, carrying the invisible weight of history, knowing that beyond the public rituals and polished speeches, this private sanctuary was where sovereigns confronted their doubts, mourned their losses, and prepared their heirs. For Charles, Sandringham was more than property. It was proof of belonging. It was the one inheritance that felt intimate rather than ceremonial, a symbol that after decades of waiting in the shadow of a towering reign, something deeply personal would finally be his. He had waited a lifetime defined by patience, restraint, and loyalty to a mother whose reign shaped an era. Every Christmas gathering at Sandringham, every private retreat, every whispered conversation in its halls reinforced an unspoken understanding. This place would remain within his stewardship. It would anchor his kingship. It would offer him the same refuge it had offered those before him. That belief was not arrogance, it was tradition. And tradition, in the House of Windsor, is law written in emotion. But then came the discovery, not a grand announcement, not a public declaration, just a document, finalized, sealed, irreversible. Sandringham had been transferred. The language was precise. Exclusive ownership, and the name listed was not William, the natural bridge between generations. It was Catherine, the princess who had married into the family. The future queen, yes, but not the reigning king's chosen successor in that moment. Catherine, alone. The impact was immediate and visceral. Disbelief surged first. Surely there had been a clerical misunderstanding, a temporary arrangement, a trust structured for convenience. But the deeper he read, the clearer it became. This was intentional, it was permanent, and it had been decided before he even ascended the throne. The realization carried a sting that was not merely constitutional, but profoundly human. To be king and yet feel quietly displaced within your own inheritance is a paradox no sovereign prepares for. Humiliation followed the disbelief, not public humiliation that would come later, if at all, but the private kind that lingers in silence. Had his mother doubted him? Had she feared instability under his leadership? Or was this not about doubt at all, but about strategy? The questions echoed without answers. In the corridors of power, loyalty is everything, yet this decision suggested a calculation made without him, a plan crafted in secrecy. And Catherine, what did it mean that the Queen had entrusted her with such symbolic authority? This was not impulsive sentiment. The Queen had ruled for decades. She did not act carelessly. If she had placed Sandringham in Catherine's hands, she had done so with foresight, with intention, perhaps even with concern. Concern about the monarchy's future, concern about public trust, concern about stability in uncertain times. Charles stood at the intersection of two identities, king and son. As king, he could rationalize strategic planning. As a son, he felt the fracture. Because Sandringham was never just about land, it was about affirmation, about being chosen, and now that affirmation belonged elsewhere. But to understand why this decision cut so deeply, we must first unravel what Sandringham truly meant to Charles, and why losing it wasn't just personal, it was political. Sandringham wasn't merely land, it was memory, it was belonging. It was the one place where monarchs laid down their crowns and became human. For Charles, it represented decades of waiting, sacrifice, and silent preparation for kingship. So why would the Queen bypass him entirely, and why Catherine? To understand the depth of the wound, you have to understand what Sandringham meant inside the royal circle. It was the private heartbeat of the monarchy, the place where public masks slipped and private truths surfaced. It was where Christmas gatherings carried more than festive cheer. They carried hierarchy, expectation, and subtle signals about who stood where in the invisible order of succession. The Queen treated Sandringham not simply as property, but as sanctuary. Decisions made there often echoed louder than proclamations made in Parliament, and Charles knew that. He had always known that. From his youth, there was an unspoken certainty that Sandringham would one day fall under his quiet authority. Not as a gift, not as a surprise, but as a continuation of lineage. He had walked its grounds as heir apparent, absorbing its rhythms, internalizing its responsibilities. Every year of waiting reinforced the belief, but when his time came, Sandringham would be both refuge and reward, a space where he could define his reign away from scrutiny. That assumption was not entitlement, it was inheritance shaped by precedent. But over time, small tensions began to ripple beneath the surface. There were private discussions about estate management, about modernization, about the balance between tradition and sustainability. Charles had his own ideas deeply held, often progressive, about stewardship and reform. Yet whispers circulated that the Queen did not always agree with his pace or his priorities. Sandringham, symbolic as it was, became a quiet arena for differing visions of the future. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic, just subtle divergence. And in those same years, Catherine's presence grew more pronounced. At first, she appeared simply as William's supportive partner, graceful and measured. But gradually her role expanded. She listened more than she spoke. She observed more than she reacted. At Sandringham, she was not merely attending gatherings, she was absorbing legacy. Palace insiders began to murmur that the Queen found comfort in Catherine's steadiness, that conversations between them extended beyond pleasantries into matters of continuity and public trust. There were also whispers of Catherine gently encouraging adjustments to royal traditions, not dismantling them, but refining them, small evolutions that resonated with a younger generation. Her approach was subtle yet effective, respectful yet forward-thinking, and as public approval for her rose, so too did speculation that the Queen saw in her a stabilizing force for turbulent times. In the Queen's final years, that reliance reportedly deepened. Catherine was said to have become a quiet confidant, someone who balanced empathy with discipline. For Charles, this shift may have felt gradual at first, almost imperceptible. But over time, the emotional distance between mother and son widened in ways neither publicly acknowledged. The Queen, ever strategic, was thinking beyond sentiment. Charles, ever dutiful, believed loyalty and patience would be enough. Yet when Sandringham was transferred exclusively to Catherine, those subtle shifts crystallized into painful clarity. What once felt tradition now felt like redirection. What once seemed inevitable now felt deliberately altered. And beneath the surface of ceremony and composure, a fracture formed, not loud, not visible, but deeply personal. Yet beneath the surface of tradition and loyalty, there were quiet moments that hinted this transfer was not sudden, it was planned. In her final years, the Queen was watching, observing, calculating. While the world saw ceremony, she saw stability. While the press saw headlines, she saw the future. And according to insiders, it was Catherine, not Charles, who embodied that future. The decision regarding Sandringham may not have been about property at all, but protection. Behind the public rituals and carefully managed appearances, the Queen had entered a phase of quiet assessment. Age had not dulled her instincts. If anything, it sharpened them. She understood that monarchies do not collapse overnight, they erode slowly, through missteps, misjudgments, and shifting public trust. Every smile, every speech, every partnership was weighed against a single question: who can secure this institution when I am no longer here? And in those reflections, Catherine's presence began to carry unusual significance. Private reliance grew subtly at first. Invitations extended, conversations lengthened. Catherine was reportedly included in discussions that reached beyond ceremonial duties and into the fragile mechanics of reputation, unity, and generational transition. She did not push herself forward. That was precisely the point. She listened, she absorbed, she responded with composure rather than impulse. In a family often defined by strong personalities, her restraint became a quiet asset. There were murmurs that she stepped into advisory spaces rarely occupied by someone of her position, not formally, not announced, but consistently. The Queen, acutely aware of the changing world outside palace walls, valued Catherine's instinct for public sentiment. She saw how effortlessly Catherine connected across social divides, how criticism rarely stuck, how trust seemed to follow her. In turbulent times, that kind of credibility is currency. At the same time, subtle tensions around Charles' public perception lingered. He had spent decades shaping his identity, championing causes, speaking candidly about issues that once would have remained unspoken, admirable to many, controversial to others. The Queen, ever cautious, understood that modern monarchy required both conviction and caution, stability over spectacle, continuity over charisma. It was not that she doubted Charles's dedication, it was that she feared unpredictability in a world already brimming with it. Catherine's emotional intelligence stood in contrast. She navigated complex dynamics without confrontation. She built alliances without demanding attention. Diplomacy came naturally to her, not as strategy, but as instinct. And perhaps that is what the Queen valued most, the ability to soothe rather than stir, to strengthen rather than strain. When viewed through that lens, the transfer of Sandringham begins to resemble something larger than favoritism. It reads as a safeguard, a deliberate anchoring of the monarchy's most personal estate in the hands of the figure perceived as its most stabilizing force. By placing Sandringham with Catherine, the Queen may have been fortifying the future quietly, ensuring that the symbolic heart of the royal family rested where public trust felt strongest. And then there is the question of William. Why bypass him? Some suggest it was intentional, a symbolic message that the monarchy's strength lies not only in bloodline, but in partnership. By naming Catherine exclusively, the Queen may have been elevating the role of the future Queen in ways unprecedented. It was bold, it was unconventional, and it carried unmistakable weight. But when Charles learned this wasn't symbolic, it was legally binding. The emotional fallout became impossible to contain. It wasn't during a ceremony. It wasn't announced publicly. It came in private, a document, a confirmation, a line that couldn't be undone. Sandringham. Transferred. Exclusively to Catherine. In that instant, decades of loyalty and expectation collapsed. The heir had waited a lifetime to inherit the crown, but the sanctuary of his mother had already chosen someone else. The briefing was quiet, clinical, almost indifferent in tone. A senior advisor, a legal confirmation, language drafted long before the moment of discovery. There was no dramatic unveiling, no ceremonial handover, just paper, ink, authority. The kind of authority that does not ask permission because it no longer needs to. Charles read the words once, then again, hoping context might soften their meaning, hoping there was nuance hidden between the lines. There was none. Transferred. Exclusively, the word lingered. It did not say shared. It did not say held in trust. It did not say future allocation subject to review. It said exclusively, final, absolute, a decision already executed before he even wore the crown. The realization struck with a force far greater than any political disagreement. This was not policy. This was personal. Shock arrived first, sharp and disorienting. For a fleeting second, he questioned whether he had misunderstood the timeline. Had this been arranged during a moment of illness? Was it influenced by advisors? Why had he not been consulted? The questions moved quickly, but beneath them lay something heavier, a sense of quiet displacement. He had accepted a lifetime of waiting. He had accepted scrutiny, criticism, sacrifice. But this felt like being written out of a chapter he believed had always been his. Disbelief turned into a more dangerous emotion, doubt. Had his mother lost confidence in him? Had she feared instability? Or was she protecting the monarchy from something she believed he could not control? As king, he understood strategic planning. Monarchs think in decades, not days, but as a son, the decision cut deeper. Sandringham was where he had spent private moments with her, where conversations unfolded without cameras, where tradition felt intimate rather than institutional. To discover that those memories were now symbolically entrusted elsewhere created a fracture he could not publicly acknowledge. Timing intensified the wound. The transfer had been finalized before her passing, quietly sealed, while the world assumed continuity. There had been no discussion, no warning. The secrecy suggested intention. It suggested deliberation, and that deliberation implied a judgment he had never been invited to challenge. Then came the inevitable calculation of perception. If this became public knowledge, what narrative would form? Would commentators frame it as a vote of no confidence? Would it suggest that the Queen placed greater faith in Catherine's stewardship than in her own son's? In monarchy, symbolism is power, and this symbol was explosive. Advisors would eventually attempt to manage interpretation, to soften implications, to emphasize unity. But in that first moment, there was no strategy, only impact. The king demanded composure. The son felt betrayal. One urged restraint, reminding him that monarchy survives through dignity. The other replayed every memory of expectation, every assumption quietly nurtured over decades. The crown on his head suddenly felt heavier, not because of public burden, but because of private loss. And within palace walls, tension began to ripple outward. Star sensed the shift. Conversations shortened. Eyes avoided meeting his for too long. The estate that once represented unity now hovered like an unspoken question. Was this a correction, a safeguard, or a silent redefinition of hierarchy? The monarchy thrives on continuity, yet in that moment continuity fractured. Sandringham had chosen Catherine, not ceremonially, not symbolically, but legally, and legality does not bend to emotion. Yet as Charles grappled with heartbreak, Catherine faced a different kind of pressure, one she never publicly asked for. Catherine never demanded Sandringham. She never campaigned for it. Yet, suddenly, she stood at the center of a royal earthquake. A gift meant to protect the future had placed her in silent conflict with the present king. And in the palace corridors, every glance carried weight. When the confirmation reached her, those close to the inner circle say her first reaction was not triumph but disbelief. She had understood the estate's importance. She knew what it symbolized to the monarchy, and more personally, to Charles. The idea that it had been transferred exclusively into her name felt less like an honor and more like an unexpected burden. There was humility in her response, even hesitation, because this was not a ceremonial title or a patronage to gracefully accept. This was legacy, and legacy always comes with consequences. Exclusive ownership altered everything. It meant that Sandringham was no longer simply a family sanctuary shared across generations. It was now legally anchored to her. That reality carried a pressure she had never publicly prepared for. Catherine understood optics. She understood perception. She knew that even silence could be interpreted as strategy. Accepting the transfer might be seen as ambition. Questioning it might appear ungrateful. Every possible response felt politically charged. William, positioned between father and wife, adopted a posture of steady support. He reassured Catherine privately, emphasizing that the Queen's decision was likely rooted in long-term stability rather than personal favoritism. Yet even he moved cautiously. He knew how deeply this would affect his father. He knew that monarchy is built not only on law, but on loyalty. His role became delicate, a balancing act between honoring his grandmother's foresight and preserving his father's dignity. For Catherine, the fear of appearing divisive lingered beneath every public engagement. She had built her image carefully over the years, dependable, measured, quietly strong. The last thing she wanted was to be perceived as a catalyst for fracture within the family. And yet, without speaking a word, she had become exactly that, a symbol of the Queen's ultimate trust. Despite the tension, her loyalty to Charles reportedly remained firm. Those within the palace suggest she made deliberate efforts to avoid asserting authority over Sandringham too quickly. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping changes. Instead, there was restraint, a recognition that the emotional landscape required patience. She understood that her gain was, in some ways, his loss, and that awareness shaped her approach. Inside palace walls, opinions quietly divided. Some staff members viewed the transfer as visionary, a bold reinforcement of the monarchy's future through a figure widely admired by the public. Others worried about the subtle implications, the possibility that this decision signaled a recalibration of internal hierarchy. Conversations became more guarded, alignments more cautious. Sandringham, once neutral ground, now carried layered meaning. Gradually, however, Catherine could not avoid stepping into the symbolic authority that came with ownership. Invitations referenced her role, advisors sought her input. The estate's future direction, whether she intended it or not, rested with her judgment, and in that shift, a new dynamic emerged, one that elevated her influence beyond ceremonial expectation. But the true impact of the transfer wasn't confined to private emotions. It threatened to reshape the monarchy's power balance. Behind palace walls, the question echoed, what does it mean when the Queen's most personal estate bypasses the reigning king? Was this an act of trust or quiet correction? As advisors debated constitutional optics, one truth became clear. Sandringham was no longer just property, it was power. The transfer did not alter the line of succession. It did not rewrite law, but symbolism in a monarchy often carries more force than legislation. Sandringham represented continuity, and continuity had now been redirected. Senior advisors quickly understood the delicacy of the moment. If the estate's exclusive transfer to Catherine became widely interpreted as a signal of preference, it could subtly undermine the authority of the king, not in official capacity, but in perception. And perception, in royal life, is everything. Concerns about precedent surfaced immediately. If a sovereign could quietly redirect such a significant private inheritance away from the reigning monarch, what did that imply about internal confidence? Was this a singular strategic move tied to unique circumstances? Or did it establish a new, unspoken flexibility within royal tradition? The ambiguity itself was dangerous. Monarchy thrives on predictability. The moment predictability wavers, speculation rushes in to fill the void. Charles's authority was not openly challenged, but it was quietly complicated. The crown rested firmly on his head, yet one of its most intimate symbols had shifted elsewhere. In private discussions, aides debated messaging. Should the transfer be framed as a gesture of intergenerational unity, as a modernization of estate management, or should it remain understated, almost invisible, to avoid inviting scrutiny? Each option carried risk. Over-explain, and it looks defensive. Say nothing, and it invites imagination. Meanwhile, Catherine's symbolic influence expanded almost involuntarily. With ownership came association. Sandringham was no longer merely a royal retreat. It was now linked directly to her stewardship. That connection elevated her profile beyond future promise into present authority. Public goodwill toward her amplified the narrative that she represented stability. And stability in uncertain times becomes a form of soft power. Speculation about succession stability intensified behind closed doors. While William remained the unquestioned heir to the throne, observers began to wonder whether the Queen's final decision was less about titles and more about temperament. Had she sought to reinforce the monarchy's long-term equilibrium by anchoring its most personal estate in the hands of its most publicly trusted figure? If so, what did that suggest about the pressures facing Charles's reign? The internal equilibrium of the royal household grew increasingly fragile. No one wanted open conflict, no one desired public division, yet tension lingered beneath diplomatic language and careful smiles. Staff became acutely aware of shifting dynamics. Invitations, seating arrangements, advisory access, even minor details, began to carry heightened meaning. Sandringham, once a shared emblem of continuity, had become a quiet axis around which influence rotated. The monarchy has survived wars, scandals, abdications, but it has always relied on a delicate balance between tradition and adaptation. This decision disrupted that balance, not explosively, but subtly, and subtle shifts often proved the most transformative. And just when tensions seemed manageable, the public began to notice the shift. At first, it was a whisper, then a headline, then a storm. When news of the transfer surfaced, public reaction was immediate and divided. Some saw it as brilliant foresight, others saw betrayal. But one thing was undeniable: Catherine's role in the monarchy had permanently transformed. The media did what it always does when confronted with a crack in royal tradition. It magnified it. Commentators dissected every angle. Analysts debated constitutional nuance. Headlines questioned whether this was a calculated masterstroke by a late sovereign or a subtle rebuke of her successor. Words like unprecedented, strategic, and controversial flooded the narrative. Sandringham was no longer a quiet estate tucked within royal heritage. It was a symbol thrust into the center of public discourse. For many, Catherine emerged as the embodiment of stability. Polls and opinion pieces praised her composure, her measured presence, her ability to connect without provoking. Supporters framed the transfer as a visionary move, a way of anchoring the monarchy's most cherished sanctuary to the figure who commanded widespread trust. They argued that in turbulent times, foresight matters more than protocol. To them, this was not betrayal. It was protection. Yet critics raised sharper questions. Why would a reigning king be bypassed in favor of his daughter-in-law? What message did that send about authority? Some voices suggested that the symbolism weakened Charles's image, even if unintentionally. Others speculated about private tensions, amplifying the idea that this decision reflected more than strategy. The monarchy thrives on unity, but unity becomes fragile when interpretation fractures. Social media accelerated the divide. Every statement, every photograph, every public appearance was scrutinized for hidden meaning. A glance became a narrative, a gesture became a theory. Supporters of Catherine celebrated what they saw as confirmation of her destined leadership. Loyalists to Charles defended his dignity and experience. The digital conversation was relentless, emotional, and often unforgiving. Amid the noise, William chose silence, strategic, deliberate silence. He neither celebrated nor corrected. His restraint spoke volumes. By refusing to inflame the debate, he positioned himself as the bridge, steady, loyal to both father and wife. Observers interpreted his quiet as maturity, others saw it as careful calculation. Either way, his composure reinforced the sense that the next generation was already navigating complexities with precision. Charles, meanwhile, maintained carefully measured public composure. Appearances continued. Speeches proceeded. Duties were fulfilled without visible disruption. Yet beneath that dignified exterior, the symbolism lingered. The king had not been stripped of power, but he had been symbolically redefined. The contrast was stark. Public authority intact, private sanctuary reassigned. The monarchy entered a new narrative era. For decades, transitions had followed predictable lines. Now, unpredictability had entered the conversation. Sandringham became shorthand for a deeper question. Who truly shapes the future of the crown? The answer no longer felt singular. It felt layered, shared, complex. Yet beneath the headlines, the deepest struggle remained personal between a son who waited and a mother who decided. In the end, this was never just about Sandringham. It was about legacy, about who the Queen believed would protect the monarchy when she no longer could. And for Charles, the wound was not political, it was maternal. To reign as king while knowing your mother entrusted her sanctuary to someone else, that is a silence that echoes. For all the constitutional debates and media storms, the deepest reckoning unfolded in private. Charles had spent a lifetime preparing to carry the crown with dignity. He understood sacrifice, he understood restraint. Now he was forced to understand something far more personal, that leadership sometimes includes accepting decisions you would never have made yourself. As king, he could frame the transfer as strategic foresight. As a son, he had to live with the possibility that his mother saw the future differently than he did. That tension did not erupt into confrontation. It settled into quiet reflection. And reflection, in royal life, can be more powerful than outrage. Perhaps the Queen's reasoning was not rejection, but protection. Perhaps she believed that anchoring Sandringham to Catherine would shield it from controversy, strengthen public trust, and ensure continuity beyond any single reign. In that interpretation, the decision becomes less about bypassing Charles and more about reinforcing the institution he now leads. It reframes the act as a final gesture of guardianship, a move designed to fortify, not fracture. But even the most strategic intentions cannot erase emotional consequence. Catherine's role, meanwhile, continued to evolve. She did not seize authority. It seemed to gather around her. Sandringham became a quiet emblem of her responsibility, not just to preserve an estate, but to embody stability in an age of scrutiny. She carried the weight carefully, aware that admiration and resentment can coexist in equal measure. Her position was no longer solely future-oriented. It was immediate, present, influential. William found himself navigating the narrowest path of all. Devoted to his father, loyal to his wife, and conscious of public perception, he had to ensure that unity remained visible, even if complexity lingered beneath the surface. His generation now stood, odd at the intersection of tradition and transformation. How he managed that intersection would shape not only his reign, but the tone of the monarchy for decades. And quietly, almost imperceptibly, the institution began to adapt. Roles recalibrated, influence redistributed. What once felt fixed revealed itself as flexible. Sandringham, once simply a private retreat, now symbolized a broader truth. The monarchy survives not by remaining static, but by adjusting to preserve its core. The estate became an anchor, not just of land and history, but of direction. Its new stewardship hinted that the future of the crown might lean more heavily on partnership than hierarchy. Yet beneath all of it remains an unresolved undercurrent. Charles reigns, Catherine stabilizes, William bridges. The Queen's final decision lingers like a quiet thesis about the future she envisioned. And if that future required reshaping tradition, then perhaps Sandringham was only the beginning. Because if Sandringham could change hands once, what other royal certainties are waiting to be rewritten? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.